Today's D-Day.
If you want to paid and given away, Joe, in the last 20 years, over $1,000 on. And that's a few.
That's a lot of horns.
I'd had a hell of a collection if I'd have kept them, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'm honest there. I'm not boasting.
Yeah. How many horns do you have on the walls in here right now?
Oh, I might in 300.
Hmm. What kind of horn is the best horn to use for those?
Well, sir. Joe, I'll tell you now. Most, big majority of my horns are made from pipe-based. Now, and they're almost always this much stuff I had did my thing down there. And almost always they're this light amber on the color and white in the center.
Yeah.
See, like that. Like such and such and such.
Yeah.
Now, here. Now, the Mexican stuff, I call it, they're horn like they use a rodeo, you know, go through the boot on it. They always, just always got some color.
Yeah, the dark color. Yeah, on the end.
Maybe it runs brown or what. And sometimes your mixed breeds will. Now, there's one I think is mixed Hereford and something else.
Yeah, it's dark on the end, but the Mexican is black.
Well, the Mexican stuff, some of it will run just brown too. But that's what puts color on the Hereford, see?
Yeah.
Between here. They all grow good. And I marked them with that circle A. That means satisfactory tone.
How do you tell when a horn has a good tone?
Well, I'll roll it through practice and reshape the mouthpiece and like till I get it where it does have a good. Now, let's see if everyone should be. Now here's it all set up.
Okay.
I take a cut horn, if you cut a piece about so long, see, and shape this mouthpiece out of it.
Yeah.
And then fit it in there.
I wondered how they did that. Okay, how do you do that?
I'm about the only horn maker I know of that does that with horn. Now they put aluminum and different metals and like mouthpieces on.
What do you use to bond the two pieces together?
Epoxy.
Epoxy?
That makes a good substantial joint, see?
Yeah.
Epoxy. What's on that, and then this ring around here, and it'll bust the horn before it'll come loose.
Yeah. How do you polish the horn? What do you?
Well, sir, I work down in the basement in the house home, and I've got an electric grinder, and I get this, what I call barcode.
Yeah.
See that? Well, with it, of course, it's kind of scalloped, you know, from the grinder. Well, then I take and this will do for a piece of wood, or I've got several sizes and shapes, last I call them, put in the vise. And set a horn down over it to hold it.
Yeah.
Then go to work with a file and rasp and like, and big heavy hunting knife too, and get her down, what I call flat, that scallop drop. Then I take an emery tape, like this, you see, and really work her over.
And finish it. Yeah.
And I spray them with clear lacquer to preserve finish. If you don't, they'll fade out.
They will?
Yeah, I like all. These ram horn.
Yeah, was that antelope?
No, that's goat.
Goat?
And they're like,
Oh, yeah, okay.
like the old Israelites used, style They make good blowing one.
Bone that's covered with the, well, what do you call this?
Well,
The covering of the bone.
that's mostly protein. It's same as fingernail, a hair, hoof, the same ingredient.
Okay.
And of course it's grown tight when the animal's alive.
Yeah.
Well, there's a membrane goes between this and this. That deteriorates and so you can turn that loose.
Yeah.
Tell it what it looks.
Right.
I don't know what all you want. Now I do then keep wanting to save my show. I have told them 30 to 45 minutes an hour. And I've done a lot of places. Do mostly for civic organizations like senior citizen down south. I brag a little. I did a show for Lincoln Plaza, the Southern Association of Departments of Agriculture.
Yeah.
There's 17 Secretary of Agriculture there, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. They liked it if I do that. Because it's new to them, they'd never seen it. So and I do a lot of them. Yeah, here's one I'm going to show you. They fade out, see?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I use it for I've done for Shackly Health Food People seminar, Colorado Springs, Amarillo, Texas, OG, and East Fake Meeting of
OG&E.
Rural Electrics, Homestead.
They're all ribbons here.
Now, I run those on my hounds. I had Walker Foxhound.
Yeah.
I believe I heard you say you had your grandfather's foxhound.
Yeah, right.
You did? Well,
Yeah.
that's a good deal.
Yeah, he lived in Arkansas.
That would count for him, being a fox hunter.
What is, how long have you been in Levy?
54 years.
54 years.
And that's not most of my ribbons, have some more inside, and then these are trophies that went on my hounds. And I used to carry quite a lot of field trials.
Yeah.
Some trophies. That was my main stud dog up till he died last year. He and this one also was a good friend of mine. There was an old king. I let him have old Abe Lemons. Named him after the coach, Abe Lemons. party throwing yesterday, you want this powdered one. Black powder.
Yeah.
It's coming out and you feel it, see, and got a measuring cup.
Mm-hmm. As for the old muzzle loaders. Trying to think. Oh, I do want to ask you some questions and get it on tape
Yeah.
about, what is your full name?
John. It's John McFarland.
John McFarland. This is June 6, 1984. Joe Todd, an interview with John McFarland. Okay. Oh, thank you. Sir, where were you born?
Beg pardon?
Where were you born?
Blow a horn, you see.
No,
where
where
was
were
born?
you
Beg
born?
pardon. Yet I hear it good, but sounds don't come out there.
Yeah.
Names. Yeah, I'll tell you since you asked, and not to be smart-aleck, I was born in what is now Roger Mills County, but I wasn't born in Oklahoma. You
You were born in.
It's Indian Territory when I came along. See, in other words, I'm 2 years older than the state of Oklahoma.
You were born 1905.
Right.
And when's your birthday? What month?
June 20th. Soon make that 79.
Yep. Who was your father?
Ernest Mcfarland Dad and his brother and his father came from northern Iowa and homesteaded in Roger Mills, which is which it became Roger Mills rather, and east of Strong City there on that old Red Hill Ridge.
Was that in the run of '92?
No, it is after that. They came in 1902.
Oh, they came in 1902.
And most of the good land had been taken by then,
Yeah.
a choice rather.
Okay. Who was your mother?
Mother, Lottie McFarland
What was her name before she was married?
Taylor,
Taylor.
Lottie Taylor. She was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. Mother's good old Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yep.
Dad was claimed to be English, but predominantly Irish.
Yeah. How come your father decided to come to Oklahoma Territory?
I've asked him that myself, Joe, several times, and he said, by golly, land was so high back east, he couldn't raise the money to buy it if they could find anybody that would sell it. Said he couldn't buy it. And said here was this free land out here that the government was giving people, and so we came west.
Okay. Was there a house on the homestead? Or did he build one?
No, we built a sod house.
Sod house.
They've kidded me about I should have been a politician. I was born in a sod house, an old native grass sod house.
Do you remember that sod house?
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, they'd take a turning plow and got there where on a flat and where mesquite grass, and it doesn't get high, but it makes a solid carpet. Mm-hmm. And they'd take this turning plow and turn over a furrow of sod, and they'd cut that in chunks. And I think the walls of that thing was 18 inches thick, and they were comparatively cool in summer and same and warm in winter. Due to the thickness of those walls, you see, the heat and cold didn't penetrate so readily.
How tall were the walls? How high?
Well, it depended around 8 foot. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say it depends, now some of them had a half, what they call a half dugout. And it's dug in the ground about 3 foot, and then the sod walls there up made the other.
What kind of roof did it have?
Brush with sod on it.
Were the inside walls faced with anything, or were they just the sod?
Yeah, part of the natives, or I'll say natives, homesteaders and pioneers, they took gypsum rock and
baked it to where it's powder, or it would powder, and made a whitewash from gypsum rock and plastered the insides.
Yeah. And then how big was the sod house?
It was about 10 by 12, some bigger, some a little smaller. But the average one I'd say was around, yeah, about 10 by 12, 10 by 14.
And how many people lived in that, in your sod house?
Well, till we moved closer to town and had a wood frame house, 7 or 8. We had a half dugout besides the sod house.
Oh, okay.
Now, you still got your machine going?
Yeah.
Well, if you wish, you might as well set it off.
What was his name, your grandfather?
John Taylor.
John Taylor. He was a Methodist minister.
Mm-hmm.
Did he come to Oklahoma Territory?
Yeah. No, beg your pardon, Granddad didn't. I was thinking about that picture, and
This is the Shandy family? No.
that old fella, Joe, was a Civil War veteran. And see, he's got a crutch there and got his leg propped up.
Yeah.
Now, that picture made in 1911, and that old fella went from the Civil War, it ended in 65, you see, to then running sores in that leg. He just shot all to pieces. Poor old fella. And finally he got gangrene in it after 50 years, and they had to amputate it. He lived a year or two after it was amputated.
Now, is he your grandfather?
No, they were no kin.
Okay.
But my sister older than me was born 3 days after the folks got here. Poor old mother carried her in a rough old lumber wagon all that way from Iowa down here, and they borrowed these folks' place. They wanted folks to stay with them till we could get our sod house built.
Do you have any extra copies of these photographs?
I'll look and see here. Hammond, same as me.
Glenn Crane?
Glenn Crane
Yeah.
has gotten out a book now of 102 little one-room schools in this territory. And she should be Cheyenne way. Why, he lives in Cheyenne now, retired mail carrier.
Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn, I don't know what the first printing of his book was. And it's in the second now, and they sold out and just didn't get started. He thought few would sell, very expensive. And I got I'm ashamed I can't tell you the title of his book.
Oh,
But anyway, it's about.
I think we have it in the museum, possibly. I'll check. As a little boy, what kind of chores you do on the farm?
Boil milk cows, and to start with, before I done much chores, I take my little wagon and go to pasture and gather up cow chips and buffalo chips for fuel. See, there wasn't no timber out in that country, except just a tree here and there on the creek. And I'd take my wagon and get mother a load of fuel to cook with, which was cow chips, buffalo chips.
And that's what you cooked with?
Yeah, mostly,
What else you do?
Oh, and then after I got a little older, then around 10, I had to start helping with milking and such as that. And wasn't long then until I was driving the team, 12, 14, and doing actual farming. See, and however, I did more time on the river. We had 7 or 8 Indian leases and run quite a lot of cattle. And it's my job to look after the cattle. And I straddle a horse from sun up till after dark almost every day.
What do you do whenever you're punching cattle? What was your average day when you're on a horseback?
Well, the fences weren't worth a darn. There's new fences, and they put up a little old light. They cut posts, elm and cottonwood, and they wouldn't last no time. The fences weren't much. The big thing was to see the cattle stayed inside. Had a fence and then had to have somebody riding to see if they stayed in that fence.
What were the fences made of?
It's barbed wire.
Just barbed wire?
Regular barbed wire fence.
How much land did you have leased? You said you had 5 Indian leases,
Yeah, each one quarter section.
quarter section?
Then we had a quarter section of our own.
Yeah. Okay. What kind of cattle did you have?
Mixed breed, roans and whiteface, and this cattle.
Yeah. What about roundup time?
Well, actually, there wasn't any like your so-called roundup, you know, on a big ranch where you got hundreds or thousands of acres and you go out and bring them in, you see the headquarters. And like, of course, you had them all there on a quarter section of land.
Yeah.
It didn't call for roundup, actually.
Did you brand your cattle?
Yeah.
What was your brand?
M.
M?
Uh-huh.
Did you have a certain time of the year that you'd brand?
Ordinarily would in the fall. Calves big enough to wean, you know, and try to get an old calf in and chip his little stub horns off and brand him. Make a steer out of him too if there's a he.
How many people did it take to brand the cattle?
Did it take, you say?
Yeah, how many people did it take to brand the calves? Did you have a branding crew? Or?
Yeah, we'd usually neighbors. I had a neighbor and his 2 boys about my caliber, see, and Dad and I, the 5 of us, we could just run them through just pretty fast.
So the neighbors helped each other.
Yeah. Wasn't any shoots then, you manhandled them. And we'd grab an animal just like they do this bulldogging or at rodeo, throw it down, another and get behind and hold the hind leg, you see, and usually Dad or this neighbor man would come. And by golly, that's something, see, I've never seen it since I was a boy. You have this animal on its side, you know, you throw it, and the guy sat down just flat of his butt behind it and put his feet here and pull that animal's hind leg up that way and pull this other one back. You see, you had him in this shape.
Yeah.
And have the brand to him. These neighbor boys was a little older and heavier than me. I could hold them, but it was a chore.
Yeah.
I could twist them down as good as they could.
What was the average weight of those calves when you were branding them?
Oh, 300 to 400.
Like a pretty good job then.
He can take a lot of hide off your shin.
Yeah.
Man, them's kicking dudes they are, there's calves.
You do much plowing?
Much what?
Plowing?
Not a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Mainly it was just cattle ranching then?
Uh-huh.
Okay. You started...
However, we raised row crops all right, cotton and corn and broomcorn. Way back then there's market for broomcorn, and there was quite a lot of broomcorn raised.
Okay. You ever cut broomcorn?
No, it's always a dwarf that we raised. Yeah. You didn't cut, see.
Okay.
You jerked it, they call it broomcorn jerky.
Okay. You started the school in 1912?
Uh-huh.
What was the name of the school?
Yankee Front.
Yankee Front.
Yeah, see here. And
Yeah.
I've never been able to accurately learn where it got its name. It was, I think it was called Pleasant Hill originally when it was built. And people come in from Missouri and Iowa and back north, like our folks, and they outnumbered the people that was in that neighborhood, you see, which is mostly from Texas and Arkansas, and so the Yankees took over and they called it Yankee Front, and at best I can learn where it got its name.
Were either of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
No.
No.
You said lose one of them.
No, were either of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
No. Why, I couldn't tell you whether didn't volunteer, or wasn't drafted, or wasn't, or what.
Yeah, okay. When did you first become interested in horns?
In 21.
1921.
And I had one hound, and I needed a horn to call him in, you see, and you just wasn't a hunter if you didn't have a horn. And I made my first horn, and I'd see an old horn in, just like some of these raw ones, yeah. I think, well, that'll make a nice horn. And I'd make another one, and finally run it into full-time hobby here a few years back. I make on average 2 horns a week.
Yeah. I was going to ask, do you remember World War I?
Uh-huh.
Was there much organized effort to support the war in this area?
There wasn't much, huh?
Yeah.
And actually, there was some protesting, same as it is nowadays. Protesting isn't new. Personally, I dislike this so-called protest because they get out of hand, you know, and get unreasonable, most of them.
Right. What were the people protesting during that time?
Just us getting in the war and going across the ocean to fight someone else's fight.
Do you remember Armistice Day?
Yes, I do.
Tell me about it.
We lived 3 miles out of Hammond, and of course the word, there was most everybody had telephones, and word got all over the country, and have a big celebration in town that night. And did you ever hear of shooting anvils?
I've heard about it. Tell me about it.
They shot anvils, man. You couldn't buy fireworks, you know, then, except just now and then. And they'd take these big 150-pound anvils, and one set upright, and they'd put black powder all over the top of it. And then they'd set this other anvil on top of that, about the 2 flat sides together. Yeah. And they had a little fire and an iron rod, all 15, 20 foot long, and get it red hot, and fellas would reach out there and touch that black powder, that iron rod, and fire it, and man, it'd make a boom you could hear. And it wasn't too dangerous because it wouldn't blow that anvil very far, you know, but it'd really make a boom.
How long did the celebration last?
Oh, I guess 2 or 3 hours.
Good. Do you know the history behind horns, why they started making them? Or how far back the horns date?
Yeah. Well, actually, the oldest record I have is in Genesis, in the Bible. And the old Israelites used ram's horns and goat horns. Naturally, there were no 2-way radios, no walkie-talkies, nothing. And they used them for signaling. And old Joshua, if you can term it that way, in charge of the Israelites, you know, coming up out of Egypt. Well, they come to Jericho, and they blew down the walls of Jericho with ram's horns. The noise from them, and the people shouting. And he was commanded, Jericho was so well fortified in a walled city that he knew they couldn't do anything with it. So he prayed to the Lord to help him for advice. And the Lord told him to take 7 ram's horns and circle the city once today. Tomorrow, 7, and circle it again. And do that for 6 days with the 7 blowing. Then on the 7th day, there's to all the people get in procession, and there's to circle the city 7 times blowing these ram's horns. And they did, and the walls crumbled, and they didn't have to fire shots, so to speak, to take the city of Jericho.
Good.
Now, that's the earliest. Now, that's what you asked me, wasn't it?
Right, yeah.
What was early.
Okay.
And of course, when we get back on up into my time, the old homesteaders used them for signal. And the women would step out when the noon meal was ready and signal for the men to come in for lunch, or if there's an emergency or something, same thing.
Do they have different types of horns for different reasons?
Well, not necessarily. They just took what is available. Most of your stuff, horns then was from oxen, and them old ox horns. Now, I've got one there that's 108 years old. And they'd blow them, as I say, they call the men in from the fields or woods, whatever, and like. Then some few had a conch shell.
Conch shell, yeah.
And
How would you know if it was to be called in for lunch, an emergency, or what?
well, they had their signals made up. Yeah, they had pre-signals.
Yeah. How far can you hear a horn?
Well, sir, I don't know about the human ear, but now here a few years back, I had a chance to test it, and I was 12 miles out of town one night and called in my hounds at 3 o'clock in the morning. It happened, and a friend there at town, he got up to answer a call to nature, and he said, "You was hunting last night, weren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was." And he said, "You're right out here on Halls, 2 or 3 miles west of town, weren't you?" And I said, "No, I was 12 miles straight west of Leedy." And I like never got him to believe it. And he said, "Well, I heard you blowing at 3 o'clock. And he said, "By God, I wouldn't." But it was, the atmosphere and everything was just right, see. The temperature, the very little air, and it's cool, damp. And that determined. Now, sometimes when it's dry and windy, a horn won't carry very far. But a hound can hear them further than a man can.
Yeah.
He can hear them a great distance.
So the horns mainly were hunting horns in this country then?
Yes,
Yeah.
call the hounds.
Okay.
However, now we had a neighbor in us, boy, they had a big old Persian stud horse, or stallion, maybe sound better on. And he was a mean son of a gun, and mean to break out, and he'd try to kill the other horses, colts, calves, and everything, you know. And when he'd break out, why, Mrs. Harold, this neighbor woman, why, they had an old conch shell. Boy, she'd blow 3 long blasts on that. And that meant old Tom was loose and playing the heck with things.
So how many horns do you think you've made?
I made 2,000.
That's a lot of horns.
It is, but like an old friend of mine, he was a good public speaker and auctioneer. And he done a little coaching with me on public speaking and talking. And he said, if you can brag without lying, just brag like hell. And so seemingly maybe I'm bragging, but I have all the, because like I say, you take 2 to 3 a week. 2 weeks, 100 a year, you see.
What do you do with the horns after you make them? Do you sell them or what?
Well, I sell one now and then. Mostly I give them. And like the last 20 years, I've kept pretty good track of it. I have given over 1,000 horns to people. And I don't want to forget, I want you to leave with a good horn.
What type of animal makes the best horn?
In what regards, Joe?
Well, I guess a hunting horn.
Actually, I think if you took 100 horns off 100 white-faced cows and off 100 or something else, and I'd get more good horns with good tone out of the white-faced horn.
Whiteface. What about buffalo? Does it make a good horn?
Pretty fair, I have a real nice one in the house. I'll show you.
Let me.
To call this one hound in, you see. And then I had, since then, at various times, I had up as high as 34 Walker foxhound.
Now do you fox hunt here?
Yeah, and coyote too. Coyote, you run him with foxhound just like you run a fox with foxhound. Run by scent and at night, you know.
Yeah. What about coon dogs?
I never did own but one. I like to hear coon dogs run, but they don't put the fire in it. It'd be like watching a little high school football game as against the Dallas Cowboys. Comparing coyote hunting
Right.
and coon hunting.
Mm-hmm. So fox hunting and cattle hunting are the one that you like to do best.
Yeah, the fox hunting is
Yeah.
is my choice.
This big longhorn up here. What's
Oh.
that?
I got that. A friend got the raw horn in old Mexico.
Is that longhorn?
Yeah, and he brought two, and the other they weren't mates. They're off a different animal. And the other one was 4 inches longer than that, and he wanted me to make it up for his grandfather for Christmas, which I did. That one is 3 foot there, and the other one was 40 inches.
Now what kind of sound would a horn like that have?
Well, you want me to
Yeah.
go on now? I got these down, and so
Okay.
it would sound very similar to this. Higher shrill than you think. A horn will start out for length, maybe coarse, and the longer it is, as it gets heavier, well, it'll go back to fine then. Now I can load this, of course.
The longer the horn, the higher it gets.
As a rule.
What's the general thickness of the horn?
Big foot?
What's the thickness of the horn?
That's a good average of this size horn.
Yeah, quarter of an inch. That's longhorn.
But, yours just goes down.
And really not that much difference.
It's about an 1/8 inch.
8 to
This is about a little between 8 and 3/16.
Yeah.
All right. We still on the air? Or not? Joe, you ever been out in the pasture or country and hear an old bull a bawling?
Yeah.
He got his harem taken care of, you know what I mean by that?
Yep.
And he telling the world how big and mean he is. Well, here he is. Then there's young bull over in another pasture that's heard him. He said, "Now that's a lot of bull you just heard." See, there he goes. If you would like some of the sound effects, we won't do this suit you. I'll do another item or two for you.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Now you say you have a program that you present. And in the course of the program, how do you work the program?
Well, depending on the audience now, you got to go by your audience, or I do anyway. Bunch of school kids, I do lots of schools, and you got to put on a little different program. And I tell a little of the history of horns, fox horns, like, and do some blowing, and then I've got some tall tales, hound tales, and some pretty good stories. Little risque, but not filthy or dirty. I don't like filth myself, but I do like a little risque story. And
I like to hear some of them, as you you go along.
Oh, okay. Now, Joe, this is fact. I have tried over 200 horns to find these two to do what I'll show you. And I'll show you how they sound separate. Had a little wreck out the edge of town the other day, and they called in for ambulance to come out, somebody injured, and here goes the ambulance out to pick them up. We're out on the west coast, back off Mississippi, back where we were steaming, sounds like that. I'd like to tell people about, now this fits putting her in the audience, young or old, about a hound that I had given to a friend of mine on his puppy. Now he got to be known all over the country. In fact, he's putting her a legend. They called him Old Jake. And Jake was a smart old son of a gun. And old Roy would brag it that different things Jake could do, and like he could do most of them. He'd add just a little, you know, just like old Jake could play checkers. Roy was an old bachelor, and him and Jake could play checkers. And I said, Roy, that's the smartest hound I ever saw. He said, oh, he ain't so darn smart. I said, I beat him 3 out of 5. And old Jake, I like to say, was a legend in his own time. Now there was, out there on their ranch, there was a big canyon, always a mile or such long, run into Canadian. It was so deep that the crows were afraid to fly across it. It's just that deep, mean looking. And Roy and old Jake following one day rode up about the middle of this canyon, and I looked across, and there's an old cow sitting over there. And this old cow knows he don't need to be scared of Jake, because Jake can't get to him, and Jake knows not to be scared. Same reason, see. Roy said they sat there and eyeballed one another quite a while. And pretty soon old Jake turned around and started back up the slope from where they just come from. And he thought, well, the dang cowardly old devil. Just looking across that canyon, he's scared of that cow, and he's going home. But he said, not so. He said, well, Jake got about a couple of 100 yards up the slope, and he said, man, here he come, and he was flying low, really making notches. He come to the brink of this canyon. He made a jump. He said it would turn old Evil Knievel green with envy. And he said, you know what? That old devil was 3/4 the way across that canyon, and saw he wasn't going to make it, and turned around and come back. Now, you asked from stories, I've got dozens of them, but I like that the best myself.
I like those. What's your favorite stories?
Beg pardon?
Are those your favorite stories?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Old Jake, And Roy got to bragging too about him that he could remember any race he ever run. Maybe 2 or 3, 4, 5 years back. Well, old Jake could remember him, and he could get him to rerun it just for entertainment, you know. And he'd been telling that, and the fellas didn't believe it, so they finally got up a bet that Roy told him he could prove it, that old Jake could rerun any race that he'd ever done. So he said, just come on, we'll show you. They put up their money, and they go down the fence corner and put old Jake out, and Roy tell him, get with it, Jake. Old Jake smells and bawls, yow, 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 and starts off like. He gets about 100 yards, and he jumps just as high as a dog could possibly jump. And comes down and goes right on with his race. And they said, well, we believe he can do it all right, but said, how come he got down there about 100 yards that he jumped just as high as he could? And he said, there was a high woven wire fence there 10 years ago. And he was getting over it. And so on about Jake.
Mm-hmm. You said you had some risque stories.
Beg pardon?
You said you had a few risque stories.
Yeah. Not bad. What, you want some of that?
Yeah.
This is my favorite of the whole bunch, actually. And I tell about an old maid schoolma'am back east somewhere, and inherited a little farm, about 75, 80 acres, that had belonged to her grandfather. He was an old fox hunter, and had a little 3-room house on it, and an outdoor chick sale building, an old little hen house, and a hog shed, and a little barn, a board fence around it and all, and including the only livestock was an old mule, old Geronimo. And old Geronimo was getting up around 40 years old, and mules do get that age. Okay. And so one evening, old Geronimo took bellyache, colic, whatever you want. And he was just groaning and carrying on terrible. And bray now and then she thought he was going to die. So May goes in and calls the vet, wants him to come out, said Geronimo's going to die, don't get relief or something. Said the way he's groaning and carrying on. He said, well, I'm babysitting with a $100,000 broodmare. She's expected to foal tonight, and I can't leave, I just possibly can't. And she said, well, what in the world will I do? He said, well, get a quart of castor oil down him. So she said, well, how will I do that? And he said, well, put a halter on him and throw it up over a rafter and pull his head up, put a funnel on his mouth and pour it in that funnel. So she said, well, I'll try it. So she goes out and puts the halter on Geronimo, pulls his head up. And she can't find the funnel, but she finds Grandpappy's old hunting horn hanging out in the barn. And she thought, well, that's ideal for a funnel. Curve, you know, and everything. And she tries to get it in old Geronimo's mouth, and then he just stubborn as a damn mule. And she can't get the funnel or the foxhorn in his mouth. And she tries till she gives out, and she goes back in, calls the vet again, and said, I can't get the funnel in his mouth. And just clenches his teeth, and he just, what in the world will I do? He said, well, I'll tell you, Aunt May, what you're going to have to do. You're just going to have to go to the other end of the mule. That's all. And said, insert your funnel in his posterior, pour your castor oil in. It'll take a little longer to work, but it'll eventually work. So she goes out and takes Grandpappy's old hunting horn, and she inserts it in old Geronimo's posterior. She reaches over here on the shelf to get what she thought was a quart of castor oil. And by golly, it wasn't. It's turpentine. Well, it didn't anymore touch old Geronimo. It was already working. And he broke loose and run through this board fence and down the road he started. And people thereabouts said that they'd never heard such horn blowing in their life. Said, longest mournful toots you ever heard. Said, then short staccato notes, and then them long drawn out toots, and down the road he went. Well, I said that They had a lot of foxhounds in the country, and they thought there's a fox race up, and they all come out into the road, you know, and they take after Geronimo. And they said that was bedlam. 15 or 20 foxhounds just bawling their head off, and old Geronimo blowing that foxhorn. They said he was still blowing them long, mournful notes. And down the road they go. Well, it's about 15 miles down the road was a little river, fair-sized little river that small steamboats could use, and they had a drawbridge on this crossing, and according to human nature, while the old boy standing the drawbridge had gone to sleep. It was a pleasant evening, and that woke him up, hearing old Geronimo blowing that foxhorn. Woke him up and startled him, and he jumped up and pulled the drawbridge, thought it was a steamboat, you know. And Geronimo run off in the river and drowned. He was so tired and exhausted. And they said it was election year. And this old boy that's tending the drawbridge was decided to run for sheriff. And he only got 2 votes, he and his wife. They said that anybody couldn't tell a steamboat from a mule blowing a foxhorn didn't have sense enough to be sheriff. Now you asked for that, Joe.
I like that.
In my introduction at Old City at the Secretary of Agriculture set up, I told them I would make my program or try to coincide with what the first political speech I ever heard. And the guy that made this speech was running for governor. This true tale. He said, now, people, I'm going to talk with you, and I'm running for governor, and I want the office. But said a political speech should be like a young woman's dress. Said long enough to cover the subject, but short enough to be interesting. I remember distinctly the Secretary of Agriculture of Florida, he said, John, tell me that again. Said, I'm going to make a speech next week, and I want to use it if you don't care. And I said, well, I don't have it copyrighted, so you go right ahead. So anyway, I had a big time, and I think, like I say, they enjoyed it because it was new to them.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about it, see, they can't contradict me. Not that I'm so truthful or nothing, I'm not bragging on that, but you know how I mean. I tell them a tale they like. Well, if they haven't ever heard it, well, how do they know? See?
That's true. What's the history of fox hunting?
A state red fox, they're not native America. George Washington imported red fox from England, and the old English hounds. And I've seen not the copy of his diary, but copies made from it. Mm-hmm. And he kept a diary every day, whatever he did. Went fox hunting yesterday, jumped to so-and-so, run him so long. And he had the oddest names. He had him named old Lafayette, you see, after Lafayette of France, and had big long names, and sweet lips, and I won't try to remember any more of them. Anyway, he imported both the hounds and the red fox from England. See, he was a grown man when he came over, and like him, had participated in fox hunting in England. And
what's the object of a fox hunt?
To hear that music. Now, a friend of mine that was crazy as I am, I used to be the craziest in western Oklahoma about fox hunting. And he was just, man, he just soul and body into fox hunting. And he'd go just to every opportunity. And he induced a friend to go with him one night and told him, said, I want you, it's heavenly music. Said, man, them hounds make heavenly music, and I want you to hear it. And so they go and they jump a fox, and the dogs are ki-yi, ki-yi, and he'd nudge this feller and said, boy, just listen to heavenly music. And the feller would listen and strain, and man said, listen to that heavenly music. And the old boy would strain and listen again, kept on some little time, and finally he nudged him real hard. He said, "Man, can't you hear that heavenly music?" And he said, "I can't hear nothing for them damn dogs are barking." You want to shut that off just a minute,
Yeah.
man?
Okay. You
Yeah.
played in the band.
Yeah.
What did you
And
play?
I played baritone, and in the dance band I played drums.
Yeah.
And this good friend of mine lives at Shreveport, Louisiana, and she's a trumpet playing little dude, girl. In fact, she's been a guest on one of the two. What's his name?
Oh, Lawrence Welk.
Yeah, Lawrence Welk.
What band did you play in?
A brother-in-law of mine had a band called Red Peppers. I'm getting way back, Joe, 'cause I'm getting.
What year was that? Did you play in the band?
From 21 on up to 40, off and on.
Was that around here?
Mm-hmm. Here, Hammond. I've got lots of good music. I had a group come out from Stillwater, college boys, and played all one afternoon for me.
Huh.
I felt flattered there. It was a good race. I've got one there, and where they had it turned on and they caught him.
Now, is the object to catch the fox, kill the fox?
No, actually, the object is to hear that heavenly music.
What about cattle hunts? What's the same object or what?
Yeah.
Now, is it a wild cattle, or?
Uh-huh.
Back to this dance band you played in. How come your brother-in-law started the dance band?
Oh, man, he was a musician that wouldn't quit.
What was his name?
Royce Crane.
Royce Crane?
Royce was good enough that Harry James tried to hire him. He's a trombone player. Man, that guy could, and this ain't taping, is it? Oh, good. Oh, Royce, he wasn't a drunkard or nothing, but he'd take 2 or 3 swallows of good liquor and just shut his eyes.
Go to it.
Oh, man, he could play trombone.
And Harry James tried to hire him?
Yeah, he was that good.
But he just had a band that stayed in this area.
Mm-hmm. Now, the rest of us wasn't that good, don't misunderstand it. It's called Royce, it busted up the deal if he'd quit.
What kind of music did you play?
Oh, at that time, just popular dance music.
Yeah.
In our band, then we could, if I do say it, we could play any Sousa march and man, play it right. We practiced it, and we could really knock those Sousa marches off for band music and marching.
And how long did you play in that band?
Off and on for close to 20 years.
Huh. Tell me about, what about the Depression in this area, the dust storms, dust bowl?
Man, it was rough.
Tell me about them.
Well, the worst, we had a lot of dust storms, but the worst one that I remember, wife and I were across the river here, east of Camargo, visiting some friends, and it just as pretty out as it is today, and no wind, and just temperature, everything was fine. And we saw what looked like coming from the northwest, a black cloud, and it was on the ground. It wasn't up here, on the skylight underneath it. Just like this was a black cloud. It's just almost coal black, and it's coming like such. And by golly, it was dust. It's fine silt. It's so fine that it would stay suspended in the air, instead of just the speed of the wind keeping it up there. By golly, it's just that fine powder. And it's silt from eastern Colorado and Texas and where it got its color, it was all hard dirt here. Excuse me, it's red, And that settled. I expect that when it did go settle and the wind dropped it some along, in the houses it'd be a 1/4 inch thick on the floor. Pretty good houses. solid house. Man, it was terrible.
How'd you try to keep the dust out of the house? What would you all do?
Back then, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Women would take towels and sheets, anything cloth they could, and then put in there. Try to stop up every crack everywhere.
Would that keep a lot of it out?
It kept a lot out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still a big portion of it got in.
How'd you breathe in those dust storms?
Lots of times I have to take a wet cloth and put over her nose and mouth to breathe.
What about the kids? You know,
It's rough on kids.
Mm-hmm.
Little fellas, they'd cough and sneeze and like it. It affected their lungs some.
You lose many cattle, those dust storms?
Yeah, there's a few cattle lost all right.
Mm-hmm.
Take what they call dust pneumonia, see.
What is that dust pneumonia? What does it do?
Well, it just coats the air passages in the lungs, you see, where they won't absorb oxygen.
Mm-hmm. World War II. What'd you do in the Second World War?
I, of course, registered for draft, and wanted to volunteer. And they didn't want me to, the draft board and the like. They said, we got use for you. And I was tar and gasoline inspector for the government. Free of charge. Man, I worked hours and hours and hours, never a penny had it.
Where'd you work? Where'd you do that?
In this territory.
This territory? What were your duties as tire and gas inspector? What'd you do?
Well, see, they both ration, and I'd have to inspect it.
Okay, you inspected tires and gasoline in this area.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And what were your duties again, you say?
Well, to determine the condition of the tires, and if a man was eligible, you know, to get him a new tar if he had one that was out. He couldn't go just buy one, regardless. He could replace it, all right, black market them, but ordinarily, you know, he just couldn't go buy tar like we do today. And same with gas ration, and I'd make out their applications and determine whether they're eligible for so many gallons of gas a month, you know, and all that. And
you weren't paid for that?
no, that's volunteer. I put in hundreds of hours inspecting tires.
What about, there are many big moonshiners around here during Prohibition days.
Yeah, they were so thick, Joe, that they got to wearing badges so they wouldn't try to sell to one another.
I won't ask who they were. What did they?
Are we on or off? No, I'm not wanting it on this there.
Okay.
Well, you don't know the tall tale?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites too, and part true, part fiction. I tell them about back in Tennessee a few years back, and I tried to look up a fellow that I'd gotten acquainted with at one of our field trials, and his name was Spoon Motlow. Odd name, but anyway, that is his name. And so I drive out of a little old town of Sneedville trying to locate him, and come to a little old crossroad, and I didn't know which way to go, up or down. and was sitting there meditating, and like, and here come an old colored man out of the woods down the hill. He had one of them old Tennessee long rifles in one hand and a 2-gallon jug in the other. And he come over and set his jug on the hood of my car and light. And he said, "I'm Joshua Freeman." Said, "What's your old name?" And I told him my name is John Mike from Oklahoma. He said, what you doing back here?" And I said, "Well, right now I'm trying to locate a friend of mine, Spoon Motlow. Do you know him?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I sure do." He said, I know Spoon, man. He got some of the best hounds in Tennessee." So he told me how to get to Spoon. And I thanked him and liked him. I said, "Josh, you're quite a character." Like, he said, "Yeah, I guess I am." So he pushed his jug over toward me, sitting on the hood of the car. He said, "Here, have a drink with me." I said, "No, thank you, Josh. By golly, I just don't use it and don't care for it." He said, "I said have a drink with me." Pushed it a little further, and I said, "No, Josh, thank you, just ever so much, just appreciate it." But man, about the third time he took that old Tennessee long rifle and punched me in the belly and fixing to make a new navel or belly button for me. He said, "I said take a drink with me." So I knew it better. So had no corn cob for a stopper, and I pulled out this old corn cob and turned her up, and I got a bigger swallow than I intended. Man, it was the devil's brew for sure. It was hot, stunk, taste. Man, I never tasted anything or smelled anything. Tasted it vile and hot, and like it took my breath, and I strangled, and the tears run, and old Josh, he just sure having time. So finally I got to where I got my breath and like, and about straightened up. You know what he done? He handed me that rifle. He said, "Hold it on me while I take a drink. I can't stand the damn stuff." Had you heard that tale?
No. Where do all the moonshiners make their stuff around here?
Oh, out in these canyons on the creek. Most of the creeks back then had a little spring up the creek somewhere, and a little running water, and had firewood there to fire there.
I was talking to a couple of ladies over in Tulago, and they said that there's a road over here called Moonshine Road.
Oh yeah, Moonshine Trail or
Moonshine Trail.
Yeah, east out of Camargo.
Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of them made it.
Yeah, oh yeah, plenty of it. And that's why I was telling you, so many of them made it, they had to wear badges.
Let me see.
I had some friends that they made it and drank a little of it too. A couple of them, one day they decided, they hooked up to a wagon. Very few people had cars back in the early dirty 30s. And they hooked up to a wagon and started town, and they decided they'd go to the bank and see if they could borrow $100 between them. And they got down the road a way, and they got hit in the bottle themselves. He said they got so rich they went to loaning money themselves.
Well, what else? Okay.
Joe, you're the top wheel. Don't do like Danny.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Anything else about horns? You're making over here. That napkin rings?
Oh, I got to hear that one of the few men that ever recognize him. But they always ask, what are them things anyway? If you're going to have a flugey dinner, you know, and cloth napkins.
Yep. And bracelets.
Mm-hmm. You have children?
No.
No children. I was going to say, I got these promise reading. that's what I did. I got some kid size and like it that I haven't got pumped. Darn, I got notion to send you a pair of them anyhow. I've got some pumice. Yes, she, Little Rock, Arkansas. They just had one child, a daughter, and she's married and got them grandkids, and they're out at El Paso, Texas now. And old Ernie Bridges, his name, and he's a native Arkansasian. So I mentioned that so you won't take offense. And old Ernie one day said, "John, do you know how come Arkansas to become settled?" And I said, "No, I don't, Ernie. What's the deal?" Well, he said, way back in the early day, after the Civil War, said old Horace Greeley, newspaper man, you've heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
Ran ads and all, and headlines on his newspapers. Go west, young man, go west. That's the future of them. And said people that start west, and the road come through what's now Arkansas. And said there was a big fork in the road about the middle of Arkansas. And he said that they put up a sign and says, left fork for Texas, the right fork for California. And he said people said if they was going to Texas, well, they'd take the left fork, or the right fork. And he said the ones that couldn't read stayed and settled up the country. Now that's Arkansas, you're told that.
Yeah.
There've been a lot of smart men since anyway, hadn't it, come out of Arkansas?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have how long did it take to make a horn, start to finish?
Approximately 4 hours.
4 hours. Well, that's not too bad, really.
As after I learned to do it quick, faster.
Where do you get most of your horns?
Okay, I'm glad you asked. I tell this in my program too, and it's truth and fiction combined. I get them at slaughterhouses, different places, and veterinary clinics. I get a lot of nice horns, at 2 vet clinics over at Tonga even. And at Gary, Elk City furnished me some horns and the like, and various places. And then every rancher or people around here for miles, if they have a bull or something that's got nice horns, well, I get them usually. They'll let me know or bring them in. And too, then, Joe, I drive around over the country looking, and I see a bull that has a nice set of horns. Now, I kind of want them. Well, later I shoot the bull. You can believe that, huh? Later I shoot the bull. Joe, if you wanted to, not necessarily want to, I'd do something.
Go ahead.
Joe, here's one of my favorite horns, made from an old longhorn cow. And I like the tone of it. And one thing, it blows easy. There's a little white face cow holding out. I like all too well. Now, those people asked me, said, will your hounds come when you blow that? I said, every time, if they're ready. go Joshua. Blew for the Israelites to signal them. I like the tone of it myself.
What's the most unusual horn you have?
Yeah, what standpoint?
Well, I don't know. Of course, I guess that long horn, one being 3 feet long, was unusual.
Now, Joe, I get a kick out telling people, and this is true. There's one of the first horns I made, the first foxhorn.
Yep.
It's 108 years old. The horn is.
Yeah. The horn is 108. What kind of horn is that?
That's an awful war tocsin. And I know how about it. A friend of mine found that in a vacant house up way up Beaver County somewhere. And the guy, or I guess the man, had taken a nail and a hammer and cut his name, Thomas, on it in 1876. You know, how with a nail, it'd just be a prick on for each one where he hammered the outline of his name. So that's why I know. There's an old white-faced bullhorn that the old bull was 18 years old. Undoubtedly was getting good calves because they hardly ever keep more than 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And that old devil was 18 years old. Show you something else here. Can you see this dark here?
Yeah.
And here?
Mm-hmm.
That's blood, or the bulls have been fighting. And it does the same thing on the horn as you bruise your fingernail, you know, and get a blood blister under it. You've had that.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it does the same thing on the horn. See? Here's more.
Okay.
And that goes right into the horn. Here's a water buffalo horn. My granddaughter brought me from Taiwan. She worked in the shipbuilding deal over there for a year.
Water buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
I saw those when I was overseas.
And this old wealthy Chinaman that owned the shipyard in the Lightcroft, she gave him a bolo tie and some things that I had made out of horn, you know. So when she went to come home, he handed her this and says, "Take this to your grandfather." What you mean? And it was a flower vase. See, it had red ribbon in it. And of course, this sharp point, I put the mouthpiece on it myself, make a foxhorn. But kind of proud because that old rich Chinaman says, "Take that to your grandfather."
Right.
He sure liked Susie and and she said he was a fine old guy.
Well, I think we have.
Lord, that boy people to death. Our friend of Gary butchered that yoke.
Yeah. That's good. Well, thank you. About the history of leading. Now, when was the town settled? Town of Beatty?
11, I believe.
1911? Who was Leedy? Was there a man named Leedy?
Yeah. That's kind of, I'll tell you, odd deal. His name was L-E-D-Y. And the old guy that was named after, he made a loop on his Y there, on the part that looked like he had an E.
Yeah.
And when they incorporated it, well, they interpreted that as a E, L-E-D-Y. So the lady that man is named after is different actually than Tanner.
Did you know Mr. Meady?
I met him, you know.
Was he one of the early homesteaders in this area, or?
Yeah, I don't know too much about him, you know, but he knows Hunter anyway.
What year did you move to Meady?
29.
29. Just in time for the Depression.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was rough.
How did the Depression affect the town of Meady?
Well, sir, everybody was in the same predicament, if you call it that, right? And we just weathered the storm, that's all. I had, when I come, I had farmed before that. In fact, before I farmed 1 year. Before that, I'd run a wholesale oil company for years. And my brother had 4 days here, and he wanted me to join him, which I did in 29. And guess what? I built this house. I had a little pocket money. But later, I had a wife and 3 children. Built this house, a car and all of 7 years. Pretty rough, wouldn't it?
It sure would.
But we got the wife, she made the children's own dresses. And dressed them real neat. And all girls. We weathered it. And all the better for it, I guess.
Okay.